Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today, for engaging in such important multi-sectoral and multidisciplinary conversations across the entire building sector. My name is Lindsay Falaska. I'm the director of the Building Innovation Hub, a program of the Institute for Market Transformation. I'd like to thank our co-hosts for tonight, the District Department of Energy and Environment and the Embassy of France, for working together with us to bring our local private and public leadership here tonight. As we all know, addressing climate change through the built environment takes a holistic approach. At the event tonight are representatives from our federal government, our local government, our private commercial real estate industry, our international community, and our local community leaders. We are only going to solve this global problem by bringing all of those groups, all of you, together locally to achieve lasting impact. I'm excited to convene this group of leaders to advance the conversation, to celebrate our successes to date, and especially show why DC represents such an opportune place for advancement and leadership in the sustainable building sector. The federal government is committed to greenhouse gas reductions, the district government is committed to achieving carbon neutrality, and each of you are here because you and your colleagues support climate action through sustainable buildings. This confluence of policy goals and a thriving green building market is why DC is a prime location for this conversation and why now is the moment of action. I want to encourage all of you to continue doing your great work, and hopefully tonight inspires you to go even farther by collaborating with one another. That's why we asked that final question in the roundtable conversations. What do you think is the most critical step in decarbonizing buildings by 2050 to showcase what this group of leaders has identified as the necessary and urgent steps we need to take? This decade is critical to meeting our global climate goals, and what we build and rebuild now will in part determine our future. So I thank each of you for coming, for learning, and for your partnership, and to really help us transform our buildings. And so with that, I would like to introduce the Ambassador to France, Philippe Etienne, to also provide some welcoming remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm delighted to introduce this event organized jointly by the District Department of Energy and Environment, the Building Innovation Hub, and the French Embassy to promote France and America's shared goals of energy efficiency. I am particularly honored to open this panel as the French Embassy has a long-standing commitment to demonstrating and achieving ambitious eco-friendly goals through a specific approach we call the Green Embassy. This type of collaboration with Washington, D.C., our host community, which we thank for its hospitality, we are happy to live in Washington, is really important. And it's no coincidence that it's being done in such an important area as sustainable buildings and innovative technologies. We will never underline enough the essential role of local authorities in climate action. We want together to reaffirm the work that has been done, but also the challenges that lie ahead, as illustrated by your many discussions this afternoon. And we want also to have this opportunity to recognize the district's commitment and focus on connecting communities, buildings, and businesses. Together with the role of the local governments, we need a framework supported at the national level and at the international level. And so I am pleased to welcome also the representatives from the Department of Energy. Throughout the UN climate conferences, our countries have supported international initiatives and coalitions, including private actors, businesses, local and national governments in the building sector, such as the Global ABC Alliance, launched at COP21 in Paris, which now includes more than 30 countries and some 200 other public and private sector members. In addition to actions taken at the community level, we know how committed the federal government is to building an economy that benefits all US citizens, as evidenced by the massive infrastructure investment plan adopted last November. It reflects this administration's priorities, objectives, ambitions with respect to the climate, that must be applied at both the local and national levels. And I can assure you that Europe and France share this vision. The European Commission has adopted a new series of legislative proposals on energy and climate last year. This so-called Fit for 55 package aims to reduce European greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 in order to become climate neutral by 2050. Regarding the decarbonization of the EU's building stock by 2050, the Commission proposes that from 2030 onward, all new construction should be zero emission, given that buildings are the largest energy consumers in Europe and are responsible for 36% of European greenhouse gas emissions. New public constructions will consist of zero-emission buildings from 2027 onwards. New energy performance standards will be imposed on the bottom 15% of buildings by 2030, and fossil fuels will be gradually eliminated in heating and cooling. Those are the proposals by the Commission now. The member states of the European Union and the European Parliament have to decide. And this is an ambition that the French EU presidency, we chair the Council of the EU during those 6 months, supports. We support these initiatives. We want to promote these texts and to help their adoption through negotiations with other member states and the European Parliament. We are working this way and many other ways to accelerate the development of renewable energies. We are encouraging energy savings and strengthening energy efficiency in the EU by accelerating the pace of building renovation and promoting the use of decarbonized energy sources. A more efficient building sector has become a prerequisite for our transition, while the difficult international situation we are facing, in particular the unprovoked, unjustified, and brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, is making it more necessary than ever to take a more sober approach to energy consumption. We believe that these measures are essential, not only for our planet, and to ensure that we reach the Paris Agreement goals, but also to support the economic recovery from the pandemic. Now, more than ever, France and Europe must work closely with the United States and share best practices, all of which are aimed at achieving the same goals while learning from one another's experiences. Our two countries understand the importance of the energy sector for our sovereignty. And as this event on energy efficiency illustrates, we are moving forward together. I am therefore particularly happy to host this important meeting here at the Maison Française on the eve of Earth Day. Thank you again for joining us, and I wish you a good debate this evening, and I thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Ambassador, for your remarks and again for hosting us in your extended home. And with that, I would like to turn the microphone over to the Director of the District Department of Energy and Environment, Tommy Wells, to begin our main presentation tonight with leaders across the various sectors. So.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for your leadership. I think we all know that addressing climate change is a world issue, and it really requires all the organizations around the world that are generally organized into countries with our own histories together. And I know that one of my first experiences as a director was going to Paris for COP21. And that's where it became very clear to me that, especially with France, that France was doing more than just hosting COP21, that the President Hollande and the amount of work that had gone into before they ever got to the COP21 event in Paris was that all the work, most of it had been done, and it had been done by responsible leaders to get us to an agreement, a historic agreement for the country, and I mean for the world, but also some previous meetings had not gone as well. And so I think symbolically here on Earth Day, being hosted by France and the leadership here at the embassy with you, Mr. Ambassador, is symbolic to us, symbolic here in the nation's capital for the United States, that the work that and leadership that France has done in Europe, in the world, and in partnership with the United States to address the greatest existential threat of our planet. So thank you for hosting us. You don't just host, you lead, and I certainly learned that at COP21. Thank you. So in talking about where we are in this event, Washington, D.C., you know, I remember growing up, or my whole professional career here, sometimes having to explain to people actually live there, that it's not just the capital. People live in Washington. And we are a thriving city. We're a city that has state responsibilities, county responsibilities, city responsibilities. And that is, has been an extraordinary experience for our government and to work in government, as you'll also hear from Deputy Mayor Babers. But that more and more we became to realize that it was a responsibility of what DC needs to do in terms of leadership. And so we're aware of the agreements, of the threat, and now the crisis that we're in caused by a changed climate. And we're now also having to move into adaptation, that the climate crisis is here, the climate has changed, and we're also having to try to be sure that our city is resilient so that we protect our residents and our assets and that we can be a city that thrives into the future. We're really at an inflection point like none other in our lives, that the crisis that we're in, but the incredible opportunity that we have is extraordinary. That when the new president, current president was elected, I told all our staff at DOEE, buckle up. This is going to be a time in your professional career like no other that you'll ever experience. And that is where we're at. Who knew there was going to be a pandemic? But the pandemic has created the opportunity for us to think how we interact with our built environment. And then, of course, the other crises that have come along, economic challenges, political challenges, that we're really in an extraordinary time. But for what it means for DC, we have this opportunity to rethink what the city will look like in the next 50 to 100 years. Right now, that is what we're doing. That's why we need you here to provide leadership. We have the highest vacancy rate of downtown than we've had since we've ever started keeping data on this. So we have a high vacancy rate. We have learned through the pandemic. I don't know about you. I didn't do any video conferencing before the pandemic. And the only time that I did it really on my iPhone was by accident when I hit FaceTime when I meant to hit something else. And then I get nervous when I see someone else there. I have now 10 platforms that, depending on which conference, which group that I'm interacting with, and it has changed how I do my work, it's changed how DC government does its work, certainly throughout the private sector, and certainly with our federal government partners as well. And some of the things that I've learned coming out of the pandemic and trying to understand where we're going forward is that true resiliency, if we're going to be resilient, and I'm going to advise the mayor and advise the investments that we make, really comes out and through diversity. That monocultures fail. We used to be the city of trees. They were all elm trees. We had Dutch elm disease. We're still trying to make up for losing all our trees. If you end up with one kind of corn, one thing hits that corn, you have a corn problem. That monocultures fail. So we have a downtown built primarily for office buildings. And most of the support retail were attached to 500,000 people coming into the city to work each day and going back. And so restaurants failed, other retail failed. And we're dealing with what do we do now with what they're calling the hybrid work model? Well, it's an extraordinary opportunity to think through what a city like Washington ought to look like. We have buildings, we have infrastructure, we have all the things that you need, from water utilities, electric utilities. So in thinking through what our built environment is going to look like, we've got help. I know that with the ARP funds, the American Recovery Plan funds, my agency alone is getting between $60 and $80 million a year that we had not thought about before. We are now getting in that much, or probably more, through the infrastructure bill. We know that the mayor's put together a task force, which I'm part of, to think through what would we do and how should we invest $2 billion into rebuilding the built environment. And what I hope is that we meet and use this opportunity to figure out how we get our downtown and our city to net zero. How do we use distributive energy sources in a way that it works for us, that we build to a new standard, a passive house standard, a standard that is more efficient and better stewardship, but how do buildings relate to each other? In America, it's all about individualism, and so the buildings may use excess energy or have waste energy or have water left over from people getting in an apartment building ready to go to work, and then office building next door getting their own water, their own energy, when these buildings could relate to each other. We have an unprecedented amount of money in a short period of time to rebuild Washington, D.C., and to build it in a way that it meets our climate crisis, but it also does things that creates improved habitability. It's where people want to be, where they want to live. And it is a place that takes advantage of where we are in the East Coast. I mean, the other thing that will be transformative for the city, if we actually build a new Union Station that handles high-speed rail and we become the transit hub for the region, that will obviously have synergistic relationship to Baltimore, Richmond, and all up and down. That's a $10 billion investment, but it assures the role of Washington, D.C. for the next 50 to 100 years. These are the kind of opportunities to think about that we could only dream about before. And so we're ready to go. We have, we've got a leadership in Washington, D.C. that wants to hear proposals. This is going to be a partnership, whether it be, it's not just the money that we have or the $2 billion that comes from the federal government, but there's other things, whether it be investments from private corporations, investments from financial institutions that want to invest in green, that want to show what's possible, and then also what we need from the city in terms of tax abatements, TIFs, all those things that we do together to reimagine and build what we want. And so that is part of what today is about, is how do we build what we want, what we need. I've often said that, since the industrial age began, that dealing with the climate crisis, the cities are the problem. Urban areas have been the problem for pollution and use of resources. But we also now know the cities are the solution. That if we are going to move forward and become resilient, become good stewards of our planet, it's going to be through our collective efforts together that we experience in cities. So as we reimagine it together, rebuild our cities, I'm going to now hand it off to my panelists that will help give us some inspiration and thoughts and facts and ideas about how we're going to do that. And we'll start with the deputy mayor who's deputy mayor for operations and infrastructure, which is perfect for this conversation. And Lucinda Babers has been in government for a while. I've known her for years, but I have experienced Deputy Mayor Babers in this role as being an innovative thinker, open to new ideas, and however crazy they come out of my department, you'll stroke your chin and say, well, that's interesting, and then embrace, learn, and help bring that forward. So Lucinda, I turn it over to you.
So thank you so much, Tommy. So if you've ever wondered what would happen if a panelist, moderator, and speaker are from the same government, you see, Tommy has taken all of my talking points.
Oh,
he took mine too.
But I just want to, first of all, thank you all for inviting me as a panelist. I bring you greetings from Mayor Muriel Bowser. She could not be here. But I also want to thank our hosts. First of all, Ambassador, gorgeous embassy. And you are so right in terms of when you mentioned that it's going to take all of us to deal with climate change and to make sure that we leave a future to our children, our grandchildren. It's going to take everybody coming together, and I really appreciate this forum for us to come together and for us to talk about climate change and specifically buildings and how do we get to where we need to be. So first of all, I'm also sitting next to one of the greatest people in DC government who is actually at the forefront, the biggest advocate that is pushing DC government forward in terms of climate change, energy efficiency. He is showing us the way and paving the way and making sure that not only the mayor's office, but our city council come together. This is probably one of the few things they have come together on, and they all truly agree that this is a serious crisis. We need to come together. We need to reach out to other cities, counties, states, other countries, because it's going to take all of us. And so I just wanted to share just a few things, maybe one thing that Tommy didn't already say.
I was teeing it up.
Okay, thank you so much, Tommy. But first of all, he did not, I know that we're focused on buildings here, and so I will have to say that as part of our Clean Energy DC, which was passed in 2018, a part of that, which was specifically, we did rulemaking in 2021, was our building energy performance standards. All right, see there, Tommy? He didn't mention one thing, that's the only thing he didn't mention. But no, you know, BEPS, of course, we call it BEPS. We were at the forefront in terms of cities who have passed energy performance standards, because you all know the old saying, if it's not measured, it doesn't get done. And so we had to put forth to our developers, to our contractors, what are the standards that we want to hold you all to? And the beautiful thing is, it's for existing buildings also. Now that's the hard part. That is the absolute hard part, is that how do you take existing buildings and you reimagine them to be cleaner, reduce energy, and you get the people who are utilizing them to embrace it. Because whether it is our multifamily homes, our single family homes, whether it is our businesses, nobody really wants you to come in and tell them that they need to do things different. And I'm gonna be the first person to raise my hand when I say gas stove or electric. Yeah, gas. We all know we want gas, but we know we need to move. We need to move to electric, because that is, you know, that's gonna get us where we need to be. So where we wanna be as a city is that we have a goal that by 2032, we wanna reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. So according to Tommy, he was actually quoted, you know, my team gave me Tommy's quote that said that if we implement the BEPS, that we will reduce greenhouse gases by 10% of that 50%. And so as we can see, it's gonna take everything. It's gonna take the electrification, it's gonna take the transportation part, it's gonna take the buildings part, it's just gonna take everything. And so we're focused on getting to be carbon neutral by 2050. These are scary goals in terms of whether we can meet them. But the mayor, the city council, they are, we're moving in the right direction. And when I say we're moving in the right direction, we can see, and the pandemic kind of highlighted the fact that pollution, there are just things that show us that if we don't address these items, our children are gonna suffer more asthma, they're gonna suffer more health issues, and so we owe it to those who we leave behind. Because let's face it, we're not gonna be here forever, and we need to make sure that those we leave behind, not only do they understand what is necessary to continue on the pathway, but that they embrace it. And so we need to be teaching this in school to our little pre-K children, our 12th grade children, everyone needs to understand that climate change, energy, efficiency, it takes everybody, it takes a village. And so a couple of things though that we're doing is, unfortunately, it also takes money. We can't just do it by wishing it to happen. It takes quite a bit of money. And so one of the things that the mayor has done in our FY23 budget is that with the DC Green Bank, which I love the DC Green Bank, they are just looking for places to leverage money and to help us with money. You know, as they tell me all the time, oh, Lucinda, there's plenty of money out there. You all just have to be available and ready to put together what's necessary to receive that money. So with the Green Bank, our sustainability, energy organization, and of course the Department of Energy and Environment, they have about $29.5 million in FY23 to try to move the needle. That's just a piece of that $60 million that Tommy already mentioned. But out of that, almost $30 million, we're looking at about $11 million in construction loans. And that's because we're going to have to hire people to come into these existing buildings. And let me just share with you where we're starting with the buildings. So for privately owned buildings, if there's 50,000 square feet or more, then they're first in terms of meeting the energy efficiency requirements. For the public government, for the government, we're holding ourselves up to a much higher standard. So we're starting at 10,000 square feet and saying that if we have space that is 10,000 square feet, we've got to meet the thresholds that Tommy personally sets for us. So to do that, we do have that pot of money, and we're looking at construction loans. I'm going to just share with you that I personally have a concern that we're not going to have enough contractors out there available. We have so much money that is floating around for a host of other things as it relates to the American Rescue Plan and now the bipartisan infrastructure law, that everybody is going after the same vendors. We're trying to do some training to bring people up to speed so that they can help, but that's going to be where really our focus is. But we got this 11 million for construction loans. We have about 10 million that is going to be utilized for targeting specific multifamily housing as it relates to energy retrofit. And then, we have administration costs. We got the cost of Tommy. We're going to include that. But then I also want to say that in the American Rescue Plan, we are looking at $40 million in weatherization. We're looking at money, about over $10 million to give to our Department of Community Housing and Development, because we have some public housing projects that they're not going to be able to do that by themselves. The government's going to have to step in, and the government's going to have to do it ourselves. And so it is a lot of money, but it is a lot to get done. It's not nearly enough to get us to where we're going to have to be, but it's a start. It's a very good start. Tommy is looking at that infrastructure money, and he's trying to go after every dime. I'm having to tell him, hey, leave some for the transportation side of the house. We need some electrification work. But as a city, DC, we're well positioned. We have the support. We need more support. We need to get the communication out there to the actual residents so that they understand that when we start coming into their homes and we want to change that gas to electric, that they embrace that. So with that, I will stop talking.
So David, now we're going to kick it over to you. And let me say that David is in charge, well, he's at the U.S. Department of Energy, but that the role that you have now and what you're being asked to do is unprecedented. I mean, they like to say that the greatest engineering feat of the 20th century was the grid, but now it's the 20th century grid. But what we have to do to reduce energy, be smarter with energy, where we source it from, you have so much in front of you for the nation. It really overwhelms me thinking about it. But with that, I'm going to kick it over to you to say how you're going to do this.
Yeah, I only had one glass of wine, Tommy, so I'm not sure I can, look, thanks.
Bring
But
in a bottle.
I do want to discuss that and comment on what you said and the deputy mayor. Before we do that, I want to comment on what the ambassador said. The grid is the greatest invention, arguably, of the 20th century, but perhaps the greatest reinvention of the 18th century is one that France, the Republic of France, and the United States did together, and that's democracy. And I say that because of course, it's always important. But right now, with France facing elections, and a particularly important one, and more importantly, what's going on in Ukraine, and anybody who doesn't think energy policy and civil society and democracy and climate change are closely intertied,
Right.
ask anybody in Kiev or Mariupol right now, because they're getting shelled with weapons paid for with oil and gas revenue. So that's a personal statement, but hearing the ambassador and thinking about how lucky we are to live in a peaceful, prosperous democracy here, and not everybody around the world has that these days. So, all right, that was my personal editorial on the importance of using energy efficiently, and so that we don't have to waste our money and our pollution on oil and gas when it's not necessary. I'm David Demso. I want to say I am a civil servant. I'm not a member of the Biden administration. I can't speak for them. I can tell you what they're up to, and I'd like to. And the way you set me up was perfect, because Lindsay said she wanted me to talk about, and I do want to thank IMT and the district and the embassy for hosting this, that I should talk about what the Biden administration is doing for clean energy and climate change in buildings. So I said, sure, but then she said I could only have an hour to discuss everything this administration is doing. So I'll try to keep it to that. This is such a priority of this administration. I hope it feels that way to you all, and the way you were talking, it sounds that way. And I'm just going to tick off some of them. But the administration, from the president himself, not just the speech writers and the websites, but the president himself, to my big boss, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, to my immediate boss, Loan Programs Director Jigar Shah. This is what we do. This working on climate change, clean energy, a resilient energy system, and where buildings are at the heart of it, it permeates everything we're doing at the Department of Energy these days. I'll tell you why he should get all the money and not transportation. Buildings are the largest energy consuming sector in this country. 40% of US energy, and it's comparable for France and other industrialized countries, 40% of US energy is consumed in buildings. That's more than transportation. 74%, 3/4 we'll call it, of US electricity is consumed by buildings. And for CO2, it's about 35%. So we as a country are spending well over $400 billion annually to heat and cool and light our buildings. And pick your number, at least a third of that is wasted. And if you want to tell me it's half, I'm not going to argue with you. So the stakes are enormous just within buildings, and oh yeah, all those cars and buses too. So this administration is committed on every front. I think you know that, but I'll just say it's not just rejoining the Paris Accord and the overall goals. It's the commitment to decarbonize the power grid by 2035. That's around the corner in power grid terms, and to decarbonize, to get to a net zero carbon economy, and with it, our nation's 130 million buildings by 2050. Those are pretty big goals. And to do it at the same time by bringing these benefits to all Americans, not just the Tesla driving Bethesdans, though including them. I'm a Tesla driving Bethesdan, so I'm allowed to make fun of my own ethnic group. But it's to bring these benefits to all Americans, not just the first adopters around the country, and to create good quality jobs. And you talked about that, Madam Deputy Mayor, how hard it is to get a workforce and to train them. And it's a whole of government approach, but it's not just a whole of government where it's my department, US DOE, working with the General Services Administration and the Department of the Interior and EPA. It's also a whole of governments, plural, working in partnership with state and local governments around the country, and certainly our immediate neighbors in the district. So that's the approach. And to decarbonize buildings, we need to do 4 big buckets of things. We can talk about, I can talk about it all day. Energy efficiency is first, and that's, well, the question's gone, that's the answer. We have to have radical efficiency, or we'll never meet any of our other goals. Strategic electrification, and I have to say strategic because you can electrify the right way or the wrong way. We got to do it the right way, or we're going to lose ground, not gain ground. Of course, renewables and electric vehicles and demand flexibility. And then someday we're going to have to get to embodied energy. The materials go in. So someday soon, we hope. I'll just say at DOE, we're working on all of those, both in-house and in partnership with state and local governments, with the private sector, with research and development. The president's new budget has very big increases for efficiency and renewables in the built environment, transportation. A focus on deployment, not just R&D, of course, that's key, that's a pivot for us. Regulatory methods, appliance standards and building codes. IMT is very active nationally with building codes, but I do have to give my own shout out to the district for your building performance standards. You're a national leader. What you sowed it here, and we're all reaping the benefit. And now it's in Denver and Boston, in parts of California, New York City, of course. And the district has done that. And going down to 10,000 square feet was an important, brave move, but the magnitude of the challenge demands it. So we will try to help. We have technical assistance. We have other resources, and we will do what we can on the federal basis. I just want to give one last shout out to my office, the Loan Programs Office. We have a relatively new initiative of this administration. This is what I spend my day on, called virtual power plants. What does that mean? It means, so my office lends money or provides loan guarantees for big things. For the biggest construction project going on in the United States, the Vogtle nuclear power plant, for offshore wind, for big photovoltaics. We're good at big things. So what we're doing now is doing virtual power plants so we can aggregate up distributed resources, rooftop solar, heat pumps, smart thermostats, EV charging, aggregate them to make them big enough that they, one, they can make a difference, and two, we at the Loan Program Office can work with private lenders and federal lenders to get the scale up there to make a difference. And that's a key priority, because we can't just get there with big things. We got to get to every rooftop and every furnace and every thermostat in this country. So I do want to say I'm from the federal government. I am here to help. And I hope that was a laugh of support and not derision. But I also do want to say, though, we are here to help. We have financial and technical resources. I hope we have some political resources to political will that can be helpful, especially to other jurisdictions that aren't as forward-thinking as the district. But I also want to say, if I might, we're also here not just to offer, but to humbly, respectfully beg local and state governments and the private sector to do some heavy lifting, to make some difficult decisions. We'll do our best, I hope, and we ask that of the same. We're not just here to give, we're here to ask. I'm going to end with a thought about energy efficiency. There's an old joke where the pollster, the surveying guy, knocks on the door. He's asking a question. He says, the woman answers. He says, I'm taking a poll. What's the most important challenge facing society? Is it ignorance or apathy? The person thinks about ignorance or apathy. I don't know, and I don't care. And so when it comes to clean energy, those are our two enemies, ignorance and apathy. And we need to tackle both of them simultaneously. And I thank you for what you're doing, and it's on all of us. Thanks, Tommy.
David, I do want to just say, in my mic here, you're doing a fabulous job. I know that in government sometimes we don't tell each other that enough, but I want to celebrate what you're doing, and in our conversations with you and your staff, and how much you reassured us that we were on the right track is greatly appreciated. But y'all are doing a great job, and thank you very much.
Good, thanks, Tommy.
So, Annika Landrenau, the Director of Sustainability or Sustainable Design at HOK, I know that you're going to speak from your position as such, but I also know that you're part of a community of really smart folks throughout DC that is working on implementing these regulations, laws, rules, incentives that we come up with that y'all are really, I mean, you're not only on the front line, but you're having to think through how does this work, and then to convince your clients that it's worth doing and it's affordable, and that it's the best thing to do. And you are part, again, when people say, well, DC is, the first LEED Platinum city in the world, or DC has all these more LEED projects per capita than any city, or things like that. I don't say, well, that's the great accomplishment of the government. That's our private sector that believes in what we're doing, that you convince your customers it's the right thing. And it's, again, it makes our city what it is. And so thank you very much. And with that, hopefully I've added to your burden of that you're speaking for so many people, not just for yourself. We'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Director Wells, and merci beaucoup à la Maison Française. And thank you to the Hub for inviting me to speak here as well. So I'm going to go back in time for just a moment to the Green Building Act, which passed in 2006. It was a landmark policy because it required both the public and private sector to certify buildings under LEED, but did not require the private sector to do so until 2012. However, that sent a signal to the private sector, and that's important. I was working on a couple of projects in the Northeast next to what was then the New York Avenue Metro Station, right next to the ATF. And we were in construction documents when that policy passed, when the Green Building Act passed. And I remember my client at the time looking into their crystal ball and saying, I don't want the last brown building on the block. And so even though it was only 2007 and they weren't required to do anything for 5 years, they decided to go ahead and do green building. And so at first they said, maybe we'll just do LEED silver. But then they got what we call gold fever. Well, we'll do LEED gold. And they swore up and down they weren't going to do LEED platinum, but within a few months of completion, their equity investment partner said, we think you should do platinum. And they came back and said, we want to do platinum. So then the market was sending them a signal. And that's how quickly things change. And they were one of the first developments in that area as it was changing. And they set the tone for everything that happened in what is now known as the NOMA area. Everything that came after them, they had set the bar. And that is kind of the relationship between policy and the private sector. No one forced them to do green building. No one forced them to do LEED certified silver, gold, or platinum. But the policy sent a signal, and the private sector responded. Since that project, I've worked on a lot of fun projects in DC, including the Nationals Ballpark, which was the first professional sports stadium to achieve a LEED certification. Thank you. But really excited about a couple of projects that finished in the last couple of years, which are deep green retrofits. One is at 1101 16th Street, just up the street from the White House. That was two 1970s brutalist buildings. They both had Energy Star scores around the 50s, kind of median scores for the United States. We saved over 95% of the structure, 50% of the existing envelope, replaced the HVAC systems. They now have, it is one combined Class A office building that's certified LEED Platinum, combined Energy Star score in the high 90s. The energy use intensity is about a 30. That's as good as a new building. We also have another building at 1771 N Street in DuPont, 1771 N Street Northwest. That was built in the 1960s. Its Energy Star score was a 26, not too great. That is now a Class A office building that's LEED Gold, and its energy use intensity is 27 kW2 per square foot per year. Again, that's as good as a new building. Wow. Our clients tell us that these repositioning, these retrofit projects have brought Class A office buildings to market at less than half the time and half the budget of new construction. Their energy performance is what I would tell you is verging on net zero ready, if not net zero ready. This is more cost effective. We're saving all of this embodied carbon. And in the first city in the country to pass a building energy performance standard, this just demonstrates the enormous potential we have in our existing building stock. And so I think we're poised to do really great things here and demonstrate what's possible for everyone else in the country and really around the world. I actually also did a survey of our new construction in the region and looked at the descending energy use intensity numbers that we've had over the last 15 years because of our progressive codes and policies. And I have to tell you that they've been falling and falling and falling, and a lot of our new construction really is in that zero-ready range, in the mid-20s to 30 range. And that's market rate construction because of our green building codes and policies, our advanced energy codes. We are already poised for the zero carbon future that we need to run towards. And this is, again, market rate construction. There is no premium. And with the renewable portfolio standard we have in DC, we know solar has a really quick payback. So you take this zero ready energy use intensity, you partner the really quick payback on solar, and there's no reason why we can't run towards zero carbon today. So I also tell people, pardon me, in other jurisdictions, that one of the great things about working in DC is between the Green Building Act and our Green Building Code, our Green Construction Code, all of the construction that we do here is green. You can't build any other way. There is no non-green construction. So that means there's no premium for green building because there's no other way to build. And one of the things I like about our policies is that the greenest buildings are for the most vulnerable members of our community, for our kids in school and our residents in affordable housing. And I think that was deliberate, and it's one of the best outcomes of our policies. And as such, right now we're working on the Cedar Hill Regional Medical Center, GW Health, over in Anacostia, St. Elizabeth's East. We're building nearly 1 megawatt solar array on top of the parking garage as a community renewable energy facility. It will provide free green energy to 200 to 300 homes. It's funded by DC Solar for All. We've also restored a large chunk of the landscape to green space. It'll be a publicly accessible park, providing resilience, heat island mitigation, and access to nature for people in the neighborhood. So you may not be surprised to know that simultaneously while I'm working on all these projects, I've been serving on the Green Building Advisory Council, the Green and Energy Codes TAG, the BEPS Task Force, also on model codes committees like the IECC Commercial Energy Code Development Committee. So I take all this work that I'm doing in the private sector to feed back into local and model codes development, to let the folks I'm working with on these committees and policy groups know that we can do this, and we can do a lot more sometimes than people think we can do. I think it's a critical feedback loop that we have between the private sector and the public sector. I've also testified before Congress, as I think many people here in the private sector have done, to let them know what we need in terms of funding, and some of the recommendations I made and others in this audience have made did make it into the ARP and the infrastructure bill, and that funding is making our communities better today. And so again, it's really nice to see that that feedback loop is effective, that feedback from the private sector is being realized in things that are happening today. And I'll just finally say, I'll end on the recent IPCC report that I'm sure many of you have read. And I know you share my sense of urgency around climate action, that we need to do so much. But I hope you also share my enthusiasm and optimism around the opportunities that were described in that report. Because so many of the recommendations were around buildings and our cities, our grid, transportation, energy, things that are around the ideas that we're talking about this evening. They're around the leadership in our communities and our cities that we've seen in DC and that we see in the cities that have followed DC's example. The things that we need to do are already here. We have the examples right here. We have everything we need here today to move forward and achieve the things that we need to achieve. Thank you.
Well, let me say that I think for those that want to invest their time and talent in our city, to see that we have such an endorsement and support and belief from our federal partners. That wasn't always the case years ago, whether it be through the control board era or whatever, how far we've come as a city that the federal government and others want to hold up as an example and to invest in. And what you've heard is it took a lot of guts for the mayor to agree and support the building energy performance standards to be the first in the nation. At the same time, you're wanting to bring in new business and you're worried about having some type of add-on cost, but still be competitive. And it was the belief that that's what people want, that it becomes a reason to build here, not a reason to go to the suburbs, and that's been true. And then we do have extraordinary talent through the city to be able to design and build. I do know, I mean, you're right, that as the Deputy Mayor talked about, we have to train up a workforce to do this. There's greater investment in our workforce than I've seen ever, but your Department of Energy and Environment is now so involved in workforce development that I never imagined that whether it be training people to work in solar, green infrastructure, and other areas, and teaching people how to apply for grants to participate so that they can put this money to work. So it is an extraordinary time. I believe that we are going to reinvent our city, rebuild the built environment in a way that will position us for the next 50 to 100 years. We know that the challenges are also to be resilient, that it's going to be hotter for longer periods of time. We're going to have more flooding inside the city. We're going to have to deal with the climate that has changed. But, you know, the truth is, I think the thing that I always often go back to, and I apologize for people that hear me talk about this, but it inspires me, is that it wasn't that long ago we were down to 500 nesting pairs of eagles in our whole country, and we didn't know if they were going to go extinct because we needed DDT for our crops, we needed chloridane, we needed PAHs, we needed all these things that we were using, and we decided that that was untenable, and so we started eliminating them and trying to restore nature. And if you look at old pictures of the Anacostia River, that whole area was just brown and red from no foliage, and everything had basically died out along there. And you fast forward to today. And today, we have, I think we're on our 6th generation of one eagle family that has come. We've had a number of eagle families in the city, but there's one in particular that everybody's kind of focused on at the Arboretum. And they're like on their 6th generation, and they feed solely on the Anacostia River. And you think about being at the apex of feeding, and the Anacostia River green, thriving, as we re-nature and bring nature back into our cities. But I will say that DC's a little different in some ways. We can't just know that they're there. We had to put a camera on them. But there's times when we get frustrated when they're out of the camera sight, so we put a second camera there. And so they can't hide. But then we're worried about anything else going on, so now it's infrared. So we can see them 24 hours. But you know, that was not enough, so we put a microphone in there. So we know what's going on with these eagles and their one surviving eaglet at all times. And the only time they didn't fledge and have eaglets was for those modern reasons that happen when life's too easy. There was a young female eagle who came in, caused some trouble, and with Flotus, that was the eagle there, and now there's no, Flotus has moved on, and now it's Lotus. And she had 2 eggs, and one has survived. But the idea is that when we do our part, it's incredible the degree to which nature starts doing its part. So it's not just how we redesign a built environment, but it's how we create the possibility of having nature be part of our lives again. It's who we are as humans. We know that we live better and happier around trees. We know that, that this is possible. And that eagle cam and nest always reminds me that we can do this. We can thrive together again. We're not in it alone. It's not just the other countries and other folks figuring it out. It's the nature of our planet that's ready to rebound with us. So with that, thank you very much.
So to conclude, I'd like to thank Director Wells and all of our speakers on the stage tonight for providing their insights, leadership, and words of wisdom. Thank you all. I'd also like to thank all of the individuals who moderated our earlier roundtables for facilitating very similar multi-sectoral conversations with all of you. We all have a role to play, which is what I heard from everyone sort of around the room. And it's important to recognize that the solution will come from hitting this problem from all sides. So My goal here tonight is to simply encourage all of you to continue doing your great work and showcase why Washington, D.C. is a prime location to advance your work even farther. And so with that, I would like to invite everyone up to the main level for our reception to celebrate you and all of your work. So thank you for being here with us tonight, and we'll talk to you up there at the top. So thank you.
Thank you.